Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hello everyone. I hope everyone is having a blissful time in this World Holy Name Week and also the month of Purushottama. So now today we are getting together again. We will glorify the holy names, Harinam Sankirtan. And then Bhagavad-gītā ka chapter 15, the yoga of the Supreme Person, Purushottama Yoga. So, Prabhuji or hum, we will be reading chapter 15 of Bhagavad-gītā, the verse and the translation, and we will share few points about each verse, and we will also do the Harinam. Please join us. Let's start with prayers to the Guru Parampara. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta-pada-kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatamitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijanasahitam Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dīnabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. So, अभी हमने गुरु परंपरा के लिए प्रेयर्स कही और उसके बाद अब हम हरिनाम करेंगे. Please join us. And after a short harinam, we are going to talk about glories of the holy names. We will keep doing some harinam between the verses of chapter 15 of Bhagavad-gītā. For those of you who don't have the copy of Bhagavad-gītā, please go to vedabase.io. Select the first book, which is Bhagavad-gītā as it is. Come to chapter number 15. While we do the harinam, please keep the books open and read along with us the Sanskrit text and the translation, and we make few comments, and you are all welcome to share your reflections or comments or questions, and we'll try to address them, if not during the class, after the class. So let's do some harinam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna.
So, in this month of Purushottama Māsa, which we have been hearing so much about, and we are trying our best to as much take shelter of the holy names, perform some austerities and charities and sacrifices, it is highly recommended कि भागवत गीता का जो 15 चैप्टर है, जिसको पुरुषोत्तम योग भी बोलते हैं, तो भगवान ने बोला है पद्म पुराण में कि ये चैप्टर को भी हमें पढ़ना चाहिए, स्पेशली इस मंथ में. सो हमने सोचा आज हम ये चैप्टर पूरा पढ़ेंगे, और हम पूरा परपट नहीं पढ़ेंगे सो दैट इट डजंट टेक वेरी लॉन्ग. सो व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू डू, वी आर गोइंग टू रीड संस्कृत वर्स फॉलोड बाय ट्रांसलेशन, and we may share some comments about that particular verse, and that way there are 20 verses in this chapter. And so let us start this. And before we do that, I wanted to mention briefly that in Bhagavatam it is mentioned that how glorious are those tongues that are chanting the holy names, even if born in the family of dog eaters. Such persons are worshipable. Person who chants the holy name of your lordship must have executed all kind of austerities and fire sacrifices and achieved all the good manners of the Aryans. To be chanting the holy names of your lordship, they must have bathed at the holy places of pilgrimage, studied the Vedas, and fulfilled everything required. Now, this is a very important verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is often quoted by Srila Prabhupada to establish the fact that becoming advanced in spiritual life is not a question of birthright, but it is a question of accepting the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And oftentimes in Prabhupada's preaching, he was often criticized. Actually, one teaches a pure devotional principle. Wherever he goes, when one is preaching, he is criticized by a certain class of men. And so in the West, Prabhupada explains that he was criticized especially by so many parents of his disciples, because he was liberating them from the clutches of material life, so that materialist life is worse than death. But look at Prabhupada, what he did. He gave away, he distributed freely Hare Kṛṣṇa Mahamantra, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed so freely. So, when especially we have this Purushottama month or Kartik month, as much possible we should take the shelter of the holy names. And when we read about Lord's name, fame, glories and pastimes, from Bhagavad-gītā, from Srimad Bhagavatam, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, we get the inspiration. And especially if we read it in the association of devotees, we develop that faith. We may have a little faith, but gradually that faith grows so that we can engage more and more in Bhajan Kriya. Prabhuji, do you want to share anything about, before we start this chapter, the breakdown of this chapter in different sections, which can help everyone?
Yes. So there are 20 verses in chapter 15. First 5 verses is where Lord Krishna is discussing how can one detach oneself from this material world, right? And the 2 causes of detachment is, first is one wants to lord over this material nature, so that causes attachment, and then the senses are perplexed in this material world, so one is trying to enjoy in this material world. So those are the 2 factors. So from that perspective, he's identifying the first 5 verses.
First 5 verses are in one section, then verse
6 through 11 is the second section. And there, Lord Krishna, let me quickly.
Yeah, sure. So Prabhuji has prepared some notes, and it will be really helpful for us if we break down the chapter in different sections and focus on theme in that particular section, and towards the end we can relate everything together. We can understand what is our relationship to the God, what is the goal of life, and what is the process.
So 6 through 11, Lord Krishna is describing about this material world and how we as living entities, continue to engage in different services. So he establishes his supremacy from 12 to 15. And then in the last 5 verses, Lord Krishna is identifying, the 3 important aspects. Srila Prabhupada identifies them as Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana.
Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana.
Sambandha refers to relationship. What is our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To understand the relationship, we have to also understand who we are, which is covered in the first 15 verses. And then Abhideya refers to the process of attaining the supreme goal, attaining the love of Godhead. So that's the supreme goal. So that is covered as well. And then Prayojana is the goal. Right?
Last 2 verses.
Yes, so last verse.
Verse.
Verse 20 refers to the goal. So 16, 17, 18, those 3 verses refer to Sambandha. 19th verse refers to Abhideya, the process of attaining the supreme goal. And then number 20, it also refers, right there in the translation, Srila Prabhupada says, the most confidential knowledge. And where he is referring to the goal.
In Bhagavad-gītā, we have confidential knowledge, more confidential knowledge, and most confidential knowledge. For that, one has to sincerely, with some faith, have a reading of this book to have a good understanding. What knowledge is this our Supreme Lord is talking about to Arjun for everyone's benefit? So let's start chapter 15, Bhagavad-gītā as it is, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Do you want to read text 1?
Sure.
Okay.
Bhagavad-gītā chapter 15 verse 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhavulam Adhashakyam Ashvatam Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas.
All right. So one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. That's what is the main message in this verse. So we'll come back to it again later, but right now we are going to read all 5 verses in this section. I'm going to read verse 2 now. And you can go to vedabase.io and open Bhagavad-gītā from there. We are on chapter 15. Adhaschordvam prastrastasya shakha gur pravirtha vishya pravala adhascha mulani anusantatani karmanubandhini manushya-loke. The translation is, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of the material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Verse 3 and 4.
Narupamasyeha tato prabhyate nanto na chandir na cha samapratishtha ashvattamenam cha viruddha moolam asanga shastrena drinena chitva tata padam tata parimagatvayam yasmin gatana nivartante bhuyaha Taneva chadyam purusham prapadye yatah pravrittihi prastruta purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, and where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strong-rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial.
So have some patience. We have one more verse to go and we'll do a little Harinam and we are going to talk about these 5 verses. Text 5. Nirman moha jita sanga dosha atyatma nitya vinavritta kama dvandvair vimukta shuka dukkha samjner karchante mura padavyam tata. Translation. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Let's do some Harinam.
Sure. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
All right. Can you open that bulleted points?
It's not opening.
Okay.
That's
All
okay.
right. Do you want to make some comments
Yeah.
about these 5 verses?
So these 5 verses,
Right.
Lord Krishna is referring to a banyan tree that says its roots upward and the branches downward. Now, Srila Prabhupada and the purport identify that this is a case when one looks at the reflection of a tree in the water, right? It said that its roots are upward and the branches are downward. So this is actually a reflection of the tree. So this is where it has been referred to this material world. This material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And there is variegatedness in the spiritual world, and that has been also pervertly reflected in the material world. While in the material world, in the spiritual world, the foundation is Shri Radha Krishna, right? And then everything is growing from that foundation, so they are the root. But in this inverted form, when somebody looks at this tree, the reflection of this tree in the waters, and assumes and considers that to be the tree, then Lord Brahma is at the top, and from him all the branches are coming down. That has been identified. Now another aspect is, what is nourishing this tree? The 3 modes of material nature are nourishing this tree. Sattva guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Mode of goodness, Sattva guna, mode of passion, Rajoguna, and mode of ignorance, Tamoguna. Now on this tree, we living entities are like the bird, and then there are 2 birds in this tree, right? One represents the living entity, another one represents the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature. So both are together, and the living entity is jumping from one tree to another, trying to enjoy different kind of fruits. Now,
Right.
What are the 4 kinds of fruits? There are 4 kinds of fruits. So what are these fruits? Dharma, Artha, Kama,
Kama,
Moksha.
Right.
So these 4 kind of fruits are there, and the living entity is trying to, enjoy, taste the fruits. And the taste results in happiness and distress. So there are 2 results that one experiences, 2 kind of experiences one gets when trying to taste these fruits. Happiness and distress, Sukha and Dukkha. and the living entity is eating while Lord is simply watching. He's the witness, and he's waiting for the living entity to turn around and listen to him, to take to his instructions. So that has been very nicely provided by Lord Shri Krishna as an analogy. And then he says that with the weapon of detachment. Now on this tree, what are the leaves and the, twigs of the tree? These are Vedic hymns.
Vedic hymns.
And the upper branches refer to the heavenly planets. Lower branches refer to the hellish planets. And the middle branches, they refer to the earthly planets. So sometimes, the bird is going upper to the higher planets, sometimes going to the lower planets and so forth. Hare Krishna.
So if you read the purport of this verse, it is very beautifully explained what Prabhuji just mentioned. And so with the weapon of detachment, one can, uproot this tree or deal with the material energy, because as itself, one cannot give up the material desires. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. And that is totally nicely explained in Bhagavad-gītā. And since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. So a reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from where the reflection is reflected is eternal. So the material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. That's what Prabhupada explains in this verse. That when it is said that a person knows Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off the attachment to this material world. And if one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. So now these were the comments on text 1, and text 2 further talks about how the twigs are the objects of senses, the trees has roots going down, and they are bound to the fruitive actions of the human societies. And all this is mentioned. When we read it, it gives us an understanding how we should understand everything in the big creation. And eventual goal is that, we should understand how much compassion and love we receive from the Lord, from Lord's representatives, from the spiritual masters. And so with the help of this knowledge and the weapon of detachment, we can develop the right attitude and we can make spiritual advancement. So talking about the banyan tree, which is being mentioned from verse 1, we come to the verse 2. And so in the verse 2, they're talking about twigs, which are like sense objects. And by development of the modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by senses, we enjoy different things. So basically, living entity, has a tendency to be in illusion under the influence of modes of material nature, what Prabhuji was explaining earlier. And living entities want to enjoy. So the twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, sense objects. So in this way, the real root is from, eventually it's explained that the root of the tree is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in human planetary systems. And after one enjoys the results of various activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruitive activities for promotion. So this whole planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. Now verse number 3 and 4 is where, explanation is given that how we surrender. We are coming to the surrender point towards the verse 5, but already the context is already starting here that with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with weapon of detachment. Therefore, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Lord, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended. So after verse number 4, where we learn how we can get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, and how and why we should surrender to the Lord. As soon as one surrenders to Lord Kṛṣṇa, one becomes detached automatically from the material extension. So now text number 5. Prabhuji, do you want to comment on this?
Text number 5 is where
the surrendering
Lord
process.
is saying that one who is free from false prestige and illusion.
And false association.
Right? And false association. So from that perspective, how can one be free? One has to take to the process of surrender.
Yes.
Unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. And very simple, when one wants to surrender, then of course one wants to serve, right? So that's the next set. So to be able to ask for devotional service, it's a privilege. It's not a right. So we have to pray for that.
Right. And in this verse, towards the end, it's mentioned that when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions. Yes. They're also called dualities, like happiness and distress, pleasure and pain, fame and infamy, heat and cold, summer and winter. There is a very popular, famous verse in chapter 2. Matra sparshasthu kaunteya shitoshan sukha dukkada agama paino anitya stamsatikshasva bharata. So chapter 2 is like a summary of entire Bhagavad-gītā, right? And in that, Lord Kṛṣṇa is explaining to Arjuna that, there are dualities in life like this, what we just read, right? And the appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress in our life is like appearance and disappearance of summer and winter season. And one must learn to tolerate them without getting bewildered or confused. So that's what it is. That's how living entities are entangled under the effect of modes of material nature. So in this process of surrender, we have to overcome the dualities. And we need a right mood. When we take shelter of the holy names, instead of fighting with the dualities and the modes of nature, we simply take to the shelter of the holy names. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the incarnation of Lord Kṛṣṇa in the Kali age times, he came about 500 years back and he distributed Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And he said that, what was the thought? The right mood. In what mood should we chant the holy names? We should develop the proper mood of humility. Tanadupi sunichena tarurapi sahishuna amanimanadena kirtanya sadahari. So with the proper mood of humility, one should chant the holy names. One should be more humble than grass. One should be more tolerant than a tree. One should offer all respect to others and expect nothing in return. Only in this way one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Yes. So in our chanting of the holy names, we should be very attentive. In past 2 sessions we talked about it. We should try to be attentive, and Prabhupada explained many, many times that we should chant the holy names for one purpose only. What should be the purpose? Should we ask for a good life, good wife, good car, good job, or we should do only to please Kṛṣṇa? Yes, we should chant only for the pleasure of the Lordship. And we should be attentive. Whatever else we do, whatever else we say, it will only have real potency to the extent we are sincerely taking to the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna. Let's Hare chant Krishna. Together. Join us.
Yes. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare.
reading from chapter 15 of Bhagavad-gītā as it is. It's also called the Yoga of the Supreme Person, the Purushottama Yoga.
Yes.
And this is highly recommended during Purushottama month. We should read this chapter. So we are doing this along with speaking about the glories of the holy name. So please join us for the next section. We are going to read from verse number 6 to
11.
6 to 11, right?
Yes.
So we are going to quickly read the Sanskrit and the English translation. We already discussed there are different sections in this chapter. So we talked about the banyan tree and how we can take to the surrender process. And you wanted to add something?
Yeah. So from 6 to 11, Lord Krishna is talking about transmigration, how we living entities appear in this material world, take on various conditioned bodies, right? Various material
So
bodies.
did you know
and
there are
transmigrate.
did you know there are 8.4 million species? Living entities can take birth in any of these 8.4 million species. And this human life is such a rare gift. Through the human life, we can practice Krishna consciousness. We can take shelter of the holy names. We can take shelter of the Lord. And we can purify and we can perfect this life. Why would we do that now? Why would we want to perfect our life by taking shelter of the Lordship or get out of this cycle of birth, old age, death, disease? Why? Because this temporary existence through 8.4 million species gives us an experience of miseries. And we don't want to be in a miserable condition. We want to be at a place where there is permanent bliss. There is no more death, old age, disease, birth, and we can be happily engaged in serving the Lordship. So that is the reason we want to study the scriptures. We want to know more who Kṛṣṇa is and how we can take shelter of Kṛṣṇa. And that is the reason we chant the holy names and we study about name, form, activities, pastimes of the Lord so that we can develop faith and we can use our intelligence and so that we can deal with the challenges in our life. We can transcend the modes of material nature, as Prabhupada used to say. We can transcend the modes of material nature. Yes, that's very much possible. If we start on this process, it is a gradual process. But if we take one step, Krishna and devotees help us. So let's read text number 6. Did you want to read that?
Sure.
Okay.
Na tad bhasyate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tadadhama paramam mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world.
All right, this is a wonderful section. They're talking about, Kṛṣṇa is talking to Arjuna about the supreme abode. Yes. And we are going to come back to it and we will give references from Brahma Samhita too. That's Prabhuji's favorite area. So then we go to verse number 7. Mama vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shashthandriyani prakriti sthani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to the conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Verse number 8.
Shariram yat avapnoti yat chapya utkramatishvaraha grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandhani vashayat. The living entity in this material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another. As the air carries aroma, thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another.
All right, verse number 9. So we are, for those of you who joined us later, हम यहाँ पर भागवत गीता चैप्टर 15 पुरुषोत्तम योगा पढ़ रहे हैं. Vedabase.io, please go there and you can find the book there. Please come to chapter 15 and join us. We are on verse number 9. Shotram chakshusha sparshanam cha rasanam granameva cha adhishthaya manaschayam vishnupasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Verse number 10.
Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudhananu pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. 11.
All right, the verse number 11. This is from the second section we are reading. We have reached text number 11. Yatanto yoginaschayanam pashyanti atmani avasthitam yatanto api akritatmano nainam pashyanti achetasa. Translation. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So, Prabhuji, if you have any comments, otherwise let's do some Harinam.
So, one quick aspect is Lord is telling about transmigration, but he starts with an important aspect that his spiritual abode does not need the sun and moon to light it or the fire or electricity.
Right.
Pavakam is fire. Srila Prabhupada, with reference to today's times, again, everything is provided in the context. So Srila Prabhupada, instead of calling it fire, makes it electricity, because electricity is where the form of fire is visible, which gives light. So again, from that perspective, and then that in this material world, living entity is suffering, taking from one body to another. Yet, if one reaches the spiritual abode, one doesn't have to suffer anymore. And one does not return having reached the spiritual planet. So that is an important lesson for us to learn. That it is eternal, the spiritual abode of the Lord, and as well as it is full of transcendental bliss.
Right. So, basically we have an idea now in
Yes.
these verses that how the living entities transmigrate from different species, 8.4 million species based on their karmas. However, one who takes to the bhakti yoga or the process of devotional service doesn't have to anymore take birth in these 8.4 million species. And also, Prabhupada says here that they don't have to suffer, because those who have developed this spiritual knowledge can see that the spirit is different than the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. And person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditioned life is very much troublesome. So, we should first try to chant, because everything begins with chanting of the holy names. And as our hearts purify, we also develop the desire to be kind and compassionate to the other living entities. And then we share this science of Krishna consciousness, this knowledge of Krishna consciousness with other living entities, and we distribute holy names to them as well. So it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that one should always engage in Jiva, being compassionate to the living souls. Namruchi should have interest in chanting of the holy names, and
Vaishnava Seva.
Vaishnav Seva, one should always serve the Vaishnavas. So all these activities purify even the great souls. And then this is like the holy names, the congregational chanting of the holy names is the Yug Dharma. It is highly recommended. So now we have read up to verse number 11, and we are going to go to the next section.
do some
And then,
Harinam before?
yes, please. Please join us some more Harinam before.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
So the next group of verses are from text number 12 to 15. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
here Lord Krishna establishes his position as the supreme being, as well as that he is the object of our worship. He is the supreme object that we should not take shelter of. So that's an important aspect.
so we need to know all this, because once we understand what is the position of the Lord, what is the position of living entity,
Yes.
what is the relationship between the Lord and the living entity,
Yes.
that will help with the development of Krishna. The Krishna consciousness is already there. It's just covered. It will help to uncover it.
Yes.
It will like fan the spark in our hearts, fan the spark of bhakti.
Yes.
So let's go to verse number 12.
Should I?
Yes, please.
Verse 12, chapter 15. Yadaditya gatam tejo jagad bhasyate akilam yachandramsi yachagno tattejo vidhinamamakam. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire also from me.
So, Prabhupada says that the unintelligent people, they don't understand all these things, how different things are taking place in the creation. But one can begin to be established in this knowledge by understanding what Lord is explaining here. So we all see sun, moon, fire, electricity. So we should try to understand the splendor of the sun, the splendor of the moon, the splendor of electricity, of fire. Where are they all coming from? They're all coming from the Lord. So let's carry on with the verses further, and that will give us a very good understanding that just like, sun is illuminating the whole solar system. There are different universes and solar systems, different suns, moons, planets, and everything. So, and of these sun and the moons and several things, they are also pleasing to the living entities, right? Without their help, no living entity can live. So, if one can understand that the light and the splendor of the sun and the moon and the fire, they are all emanating from the Supreme Personality, then one's Krishna consciousness will begin. Okay? So, text number 13. We are reading chapter 15 from Bhagavad-gītā as it is. It is called the Yoga of the Supreme Person. And we are on text number 13. Gama vishya cha bhutani daryayamya mojasa pushrami chashadhi sarva somo bhutva rasatmaka. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all the vegetables. So, what I earlier explained, we should try to understand the presence of Krishna is in everything in the universe. And once we start seeing everything with that perspective, that helps us to develop and advance in Krishna consciousness. And so verse number 14, Prabhuji, would you like to read?
Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashita Panapan Samayukta Pachamannam Chaturvidham. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of food stuff.
So here Bhagavan is already explaining how everything is happening, how digestion is happening. You know, the things don't just happen by themselves. There is some infrastructure, divine infrastructure, things are happening. So, you know, so the Prabhuji earlier mentioned that there are 4 kinds of food stuff, and some are drunk, some are chewed, some are licked up, and some are served. And he is the God is the digestive force for all of them. And all this is mentioned in Vedanta Sutra also, that Lord is situated within sound and within the body, within the air, within the stomach as the digestive force. So now we are on verse number 15 of this section. Sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto matta smritirjnanam apohanam cha Vedascha sarvairahameva vedyo Vedanta kridveda videva chaham. This is a very well-known verse, and the translation is, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedant, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Prabhuji, do you want to comment anything on this verse?
So here Lord Kṛṣṇa is establishing that he is the cause of all causes, right? And he is the supreme purpose, supreme goal of our life, that we should surrender to him, we should engage in devotional service. And Lord Kṛṣṇa, when he says, I'm the compiler of the Vedanta, he is referring to Vyasadevji, who is Shakta Vishakta, empowered entity, who compiled and wrote all the Vedas for us. Hare Krishna.
And so now Bhagavan say we get all the remembrance, all the forgetfulness, right? So understanding the Vedic literature, one can understand one's relationship with the Supreme Lord. By performing different processes, we can approach him, and in the end we can attain the supreme goal, who is no other than Supreme Lord himself. So in this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, understanding the Vedas, and the goal of Vedas are clearly defined. So now we are going to the next section.
Now section 16 to 20, these 5 are referred to the important aspect of Sambandha Vidya Prayojana, like we said. Sambandha is relationship. What is our relationship with the Supreme Lord? This relationship is given in 16, 17, 18. And Abhideya is the process, which is given in 19. And finally, the goal, the supreme goal, is identified in verse 20. Text 16 of chapter 15, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Dvavima Purusho Loke Kṣṇaśchakṣara eva ca Kṣṇah sarvani bhutani Kūtasto akṣara uchyate. There are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is infallible.
All right, so we are going to verse number 17 in this chapter. Uttama purushastvanya parmatmeti udarta yo lokatrayam vishya vibharti avyaya ishvara. Besides these 2, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them.
Text 18. Yasmaksharam atitoyam akshāradapi chottamaha ato asmin loko ye vedecha pratitaha Purushottamaha. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the infallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person.
Wonderful. So in this section of verses, we get the knowledge about our relationship right? With the Supreme Soul.
Yes.
So the Supreme Soul or Paramatma, who is situated within our heart, right? He is the silent witness. He is the overseer of all our activities, and he is the best well-wisher of all living entities. So in these verses which we read from verse 15 to verse 18, right?
Yeah.
So Krishna is mentioning about two classes of beings, the fallible and infallible. Living entities are fallible. However, if they take shelter of the infallible holy names, and because of the power or the superpotency of the holy names, the living entities can purify themselves and they can become eligible to go to the spiritual kingdom of God. They can get liberated. And then they're also talking about in next verse about the Supreme Soul, right? So Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. And a wise man who can understand him is eligible to attain perfect peace. And in last class, we talked about the peace formula. Who remembers that? The peace formula. Just say Hare Kṛṣṇa in the comments if you remember peace formula. The peace formula is mentioned in chapter 5 of Bhagavad-gītā. It is the last verse.
29th verse.
Yeah, chapter 5. Yeah, 29th verse. And what is that verse? Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. So now, do you want to add something about the relationship of the soul to the super soul or the Paramatma? Because after that we are going to talk about Sambandh, we are going to talk about Prayojan.
Yes, Abhidaya and Prayojan.
Abhidaya and
So this is
Prayojan.
Sambandh, this is a relationship, and Lord is clearly identifying that every living entity in the material world is fallible. So we have this material body, which means we are fallible. We have, fallen to this material world, but that is not it. When you fall down, you just don't stay on the ground. You get up. So this is where he's encouraging us to get up and take to the surrender process unto his lotus feet. And when we surrender unto the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, we simply start with the chanting of the holy name. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When we call out to the Lordship with love, with gratitude, we attain his mercy, and so we can rise up and go back to our original position as the spiritual being in the spiritual world, where every living entity is infallible. Every living entity is elevated spiritually, transcendentally.
And in this age of Kali, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came. He is the most beneficent avatar of Krishna, and he explained that Kali Kale Naam Rupe Krishna Avatar. In this age of Kali Yuga, the Supreme Lord incarnates with all of his powers and all of his opulences in the sound vibration of the holy name. So we must approach the holy name as Krishna himself. And with great attention and devotion, we should chant. And whatever our qualifications or disqualifications may be, in any type of devotional service, Lord recognizes that the sincere endeavor to work very hard according to our capacity and to work on hearing and chanting the supreme name of the Lord. So when we read these chapters in Bhagavad-gītā, or we hear, we do the Shravanam, we do the Smaranam while hearing the chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita, with a little faith, we are making sincere attempt to understand about our relationship with Krishna. And in the next few verses, we are going to get more information about Prayojan and Abhidaya. Let's go to the next verses.
Next verse.
Text number 19. Yo mam evam samuddo janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajati mam sarvabhavena bharata. Whoever knows me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without doubting, is the knower of everything. Therefore, he engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharat. So this is what Krishna is saying to Arjun. And this is prayojan, right?
Abhideya.
This is
the
abhideya.
process of attaining
The
Supreme.
process, yes, this is the process, because he's talking about the devotional service, bhakti,
Yes.
right? And the word bhajati is very significant. In many places in the word bhajati is expressed as in relationship with the service of the Supreme Lord. If a person is engaged in full Krishna consciousness, in bhakti, it is to be understood that he has understood all Vedic knowledge. And in the Vaishnava parampara, it is said that if one is engaged in devotional service to Krishna, then there is no need for any other spiritual process for understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth. You know, if you have been following all other lectures which are shared on this Bhagavad-gītā group, so many wonderful devotees, Vaishnavas, are talking about different chapters of Bhagavad-gītā. And Bhagavad-gītā, the knowledge being discussed is, Gyan Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. And so, there are all different ways. But if one has already come to the point, because he's engaged in bhakti to Krishna, devotional service to the Lord, he has ended all preliminary process of understanding. Krishna, Prabhupada explains in this particular purport that if anyone, after speculating for hundreds and thousands of years, does not come to the point that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that one has to surrender, all his speculation for so many years and lives are a useless waste of time, right? So now let's come to text number 20.
The final verse where Lord Krishna reveals the goal.
The goal.
Iti guhyatamam shastram idam muktamam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat krita krityascha bharata. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
So, having an understanding of our relationship with the Supreme Lord, right? And what is the process to achieve this goal will help us understand that how much we can put in the efforts to come to this goal, how much value we should give to this human life, which is so rare. And with all the happenings around us, especially current times, COVID situation, so many people are frustrated, they are giving up hope, but at the same time, there is so much hope in taking to the shelter of the holy names. And so let us all come together and chant the holy names together. Yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
this chapter 15, which is also called the Purushottama Yoga. So first 5 verses, they describe the process of freeing oneself from the weaknesses of the heart.
Yes.
You know, they are also called anarthas. And, you know, if you study sometime Canto 10, you know, or the Kṛṣṇa book, there Kṛṣṇa kills all different demons. They actually represent demons of our heart too. And so we can develop a better understanding once we recognize that there are weaknesses within our heart which can be impediments in the process of bhakti, impediments in the spiritual progress. Then we can take shelter of the devotees, we can take shelter of a spiritual guru, you know, and render service to them and humbly inquire from them that what is it we can do to make this life sublime? How can we serve Kṛṣṇa? How can we serve the Vaishnavas? How can we take the shelter of the holy names in the proper mood and spirit? And so now the verses from verse number 6 to the end of this chapter, verse 20, Prabhupada says these verses discuss the Purushottama Yoga.
Yes.
So that's why this chapter is named Purushottama Yoga. And when one is performing the devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. And the most important thing is weakness of the heart. So, you know, as our faith grows gradually, it is described in our scriptures that initially, you know, with a little faith, we associate with the devotees, Vaishnavas, and then we do bhajan kriya with them, okay? And slowly on this path, all the weaknesses or anarthas of our heart, they get cleared up. It's called anartha nivritti. And then we develop namruchi. You know, we develop an interest or taste in chanting of the holy names. And eventually we make gradual progress, and the little seed of devotion in our heart, it grows as we water with the chanting of the holy names. I hope you liked this reading today of chapter 15 of Bhagavad-gītā. We also got an opportunity to chant together with all of you. And Prabhuji, would you like to add something?
So again, chanting of the holy name, this is transcendental sound vibration. Srila Prabhupada instructs us that this sound vibration is coming directly from the spiritual world. It is not a mundane sound of this world. And there are 3 words, right? Kṛṣṇa, Radha, and Lord Ram. So again, when we are referring, then Hara refers to Radharani. And with love, we call her Hare. So again, we are approaching our mother to allow us to engage in the service of herself and our father, Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa, who is also referred to as Ram. Now, Srila Prabhupada at different times identified that Ram may refer to Lord Ramchandra, may refer to Lord Balaram, may also refer to Radharaman. So again, from that perspective, the Vishnu Tattvas are all same. And the purpose and the pastimes are different. So that is the distinction. So it doesn't matter whether you refer to Lord Ramchandra, to Balaram, or to Lord Kṛṣṇa himself. But we are actually calling out this prayer that my dear mother, my dear father, Shri Radhesham, please engage me in your devotional service. Because we are suffering in this material world, there is only one way. Hare Nam, Hare Nam eva kevalam, kalo nashteva, nashteva, nashteva gatiranyatha. So in this Kali age, there is no other solution but taking to the chanting of the holy name. And again, it has been repeated thrice for the stress. This is from Brihad Naradiya Purana.
And the holy names are so powerful, so powerful. Nothing else has this power to awaken the dormant, ecstatic love within our heart, to awaken us, the sleeping souls. We are the sleeping souls living in forgetfulness of the love of God, So, Bhakti Vinod Thakur explains how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he roamed from town to town, village to village with this message. Wake up, sleeping souls, you are the eternal servants of Kṛṣṇa. There is a beautiful Vaishnav song which says, Jiva jago, Jiva jago, Gaura chand bole, Kota nidra jao maya, Pishachi rakole. The love of God, which is the only true happiness of the soul, is dormant within our hearts. But we are sleeping in vast dream in the lap of Maya. That's how our acharyas explain. They say, wake up. Mukunda Madhav Hare. And he taught us this is how we wake up. By loudly chanting the Lord's name, Mukunda Madhav Hare. And by hearing Lord's names in association of devotees, that is the best way, that helps us in growing of our faith and overcoming the weaknesses of the heart. So I suggest everyone, when you find time, please go through this chapter and read it at your own pace. Would really love to hear from you all. If you have any questions, please write down in the comments, and later on we'll try to answer them. And hoping that everybody sincerely takes to the chanting of the holy names. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. We'll come back again with more information of chanting of the holy names.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.